Yeah, so welcome back to part three. This is Jona Bryndis. We have been spending more than 4 hours already on, basically the intro on electrification and etherization as the advanced spiritual concepts of, awakening, of spiritual awakening. We have a parallel thread called spiritual awakening issues where we discuss, some of the personal experiences and while, these inner experiences of our own spiritual self are always in the foreground for me as a teacher, and a guide, yeah, through through your personal journeys. We sometimes have to go back to the basics or back to, the back to school, if you will, and up our view of certain things. There are certain you know things that come up. They're mostly experimental in the beginning of our spiritual journey, where we just experience things, and then we spend the majority of time just trying to understand our own journey better. Okay, and that's what I call, the beginning issues of awakening. Is where you're just trying to find yourself in all of this. Okay, you're trying to understand what you are going through. But then after a while, there comes a point where you don't just see yourself, but you begin to see, other people on this journey, and you see that, oh, they have very similar issues like I do, maybe in a different order, maybe that theirs is a different coloration, they have different karmic setup, they have different, day-to-day issues. But you come to a point where you realize, kind of like where we left off last time, that we get a certain set of adversities, and we get a certain set of tools uh, to live our life. Okay, and that is what we call ego. Okay, so we get our ego for free. Okay, yeah, that allows us to, physically and psycho, emotional, socially survive our life. Okay, but there are more questions that we have. There are things such as happiness, meaning, fulfillment, purpose, and even aspects of love and truth, and the freedom to choose, and issues around the concepts of life, what comes after life, and so forth, that require us to dive a little deeper and to have a look at other people's experiences, maybe not just the people that we know today, or that that we can read books on, or that we can listen to, as for their current experiences. But maybe we have to go back a little bit. We have to go back and have a look at, what the totality of human consciousness and human intellect has brought forward in conjunction with spirituality. And this is when we start studying mystic schools, or religions, or teachings, and so forth. And we want to understand at least how they got to their views. Okay, so the advanced level of awakening is, now really stepping into your own individuated way of looking at, what is a soul's purpose, and what is a life's purpose, and where does this all lead? Why are we all here? Why are we here now? And what are we supposed to do? Those kind of questions. So those are questions that go beyond just ourselves. They have to do with, wanting to understand the bigger picture, wanting to understand, the goal of humanity, the goal of, the universe existing, and things like that. So I hope that you are coming here, with these kind of questions, with these kind of considerations. I have compiled a list of the most common, of these considerations in the 20 years of spiritual counseling and energy coaching practice that I have, that are typically coming up at some point of our spiritual journey. Okay, first, before I, put this list out, it was in the instructions that, or the invitations that were sent out. I just want to give you guys a shout out again and say hello, and sort of just get in contact with you real quick and see where you guys are at. What are some of the impressions that you went home with after our last two workshops, after maybe watching the recording? You know, what are some of these inner processes that are going on inside of you, uh, aside from like the spiritual terminology that we're going to discuss here today? So today we're going to go much deeper into this, sort of increasing our spiritual lexicon. But besides all that, what are some of these considerations, these spiritual considerations, burning questions, or things that you have perhaps always sort of felt in, burning inside you, what is making you, even wanting, to engage in this, sort of self-chosen, investigation. Yeah, you have spent, 4 or 5 hours just in this workshop series now, and I'm sure that there are some terms like electrification, etherization, which I haven't really fully discerned yet for you, in the way I understand them. Yeah, that are perhaps still unknown to you. But besides all that, maybe on a feeling level, yeah. So don't feel bad if you cannot fully sort of articulate, smart sounding questions. Yeah, it's not about smart questions. It's about, what is the burning desire, that you have, that has brought you, to beginning to spiritually investigate the world or your life. What are some of these things for you that perhaps you're also expecting to be answered through listening and participating in these kind of workshops? We all have burning questions. At the beginning of our spiritual journey, it's mostly about trying to figure out ourselves, trying to figure out our own journey, trying to figure out who we are, why we're here. Okay. A little bit later on, once we connect with others and we see that pretty much everybody has the same, or just variations of the issues that we are experiencing in our life. Yeah, just trying to understand our 3D life. All right, we begin to ask questions that are a little bigger, that no longer just refer to ourselves, but to like trying to make sense of life itself, trying to make sense of, what is the purpose of going through, this life? Where does this lead to? What is, sort of the bigger plan here? Or are we just randomly colliding atoms, that happen to inhabit, similar space and time, and none of that has a meaning? So this seeking for meaning, this seeking for, perhaps like a greater plan, that's inherent in all of us humans, in all of us, and it has accompanied us since the beginning of time. All right, and when we raise these bigger kind of questions, that's the moment when we have to go back to, learning. Okay, let's learn what others have to say. Let's learn what people, have culminated sort of as humanistic wisdom. Okay, over thousands of years. Perhaps questions such as, is there life after death, or is there something like a higher spiritual hierarchy, like God or angels and stuff like that. Yeah, so there are some of these questions that come up in us. They're quite archetypal, All right, they're not as individual as we think, but they are obviously individual things as well, and that's why we do need to, you know, sort of, you know, increase our understanding of ourselves through the reflection, of the bigger self, the bigger, what we see mirrored sort of in others, how we can understand ourselves better through learning with or through others. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here in the chat, actually more in the question section. Okay, I have a button, no mics. Okay, still no mics. Okay. Not sure, guys, what I can do here. If we're having control issues here with the software, I'm not quite sure what it is that I can do right now here. We will have to rely on the chat. That's quite unfortunate because I always really like. Oh, there you go. I hear you.
Oh, yeah,
Or,
I have my mic. I've got my mic on. I could just say to others, just try to click on it again, and it might just open. It was closed before.
Can you hear me? This is Sheila.
Yes, I hear you, Sheila.
I can hear you, and I can actually speak now. Thanks.
Yay, Mandy, I hear you too.
Okay, so just for mine on the settings, you had to choose one of the microphones, and I had about 4 to choose from, and none of them were checked. So you might have to change a setting if your mic isn't working, because mine wasn't working.
Oh, you mean the computer settings? Is that
For
what you mean?
Yes. So once the microphone button became available to me, I turned it on, but you couldn't hear me. So I had to go to my own settings and pick one of the microphones that worked.
Okay.
So we might have to still individually do that.
I didn't have to do that, Sheila.
You did or you did not?
No, I did not have to do that. It
Yeah.
just, Jona said she did something at her end, then my mic came on.
Yeah, my mic came on, but it didn't. You couldn't hear me. So I had to pick a different microphone.
Yeah, there's some echo going on.
Yeah, I think that's Linda's.
I think so
I hear
too.
Linda as an echo. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably like a setting. If you like a computer setting, maybe try your phone. Because I know, Sheila, you've used an iPad or a phone last time, right? And you said that it was so much easier.
Yes, the phone was easier. I'm on my computer this time.
Uh-huh.
And when the microphone became available after you clicked something on your end, I opened my microphone, but it did not come on because I had to personally go to another setting for my computer to turn on a different microphone. So there were a couple things that happened. You turned something on, and then I still had to pick something. So if someone else out there isn't, like if you click your microphone button and it's on like mine was, but nobody can hear you, go to the settings on your own computer. But yes, this time the computer was different than the phone, and it's a little harder to maneuver.
Okay, sorry for that, guys.
Yeah.
So you see something on the screen here, maybe just to kickstart a few things and to get over, our egos, sort of like, oh, what am I going to do? Okay, so if you can't speak, you're going to have to like try to find words. But like I said, a way to maybe fix that is to use a different device to dial into the webinar. Okay, so what you see here is the result of thousands of years of spiritual research. No matter whether it's influenced by this or that teacher. This is something that we would refer to as spiritual science. Okay, so we're putting together all of the different wisdoms that came out of the different directions. Yeah, the Babylonian science, the Persian, the Indian, the Chinese, the Hebraic, Yeah, so all that we can access here, the last 10,000, maybe 14,000 years of, our civilization, our current, epoch, if you will, like we don't know if there were maybe other civilizations before us. It's possible, it's not excluded, and we don't know how all that started. Okay, all we know is the nature science perspective, and that is that, we know how some of the Earths developed, and then some how of the species developed, and then suddenly humans were there. Okay, and ever since humans, the Homo sapiens, were there, they had an awareness that allowed them to ask these kind of questions. And what you see here is not a question per se, but what you see here is something, that uh, is most or has mostly been developed in the Eastern traditions. Okay, and that's the differentiation of a human, not just based on their their physiology, their matter, but also, how they're actually, sort of communicating within themselves. Okay, and this looks very complicated, and this takes a while to study. So when you enter this advanced stage of spiritual awakening, it's not just done by listening to a YouTuber for half an hour, or going to a weekend retreat. This is actual study. Okay, this takes years and years, to actually filter out information that you can say, okay, this feels right. This, sort of aligns with my inner experience. So we all enter spirituality with an experience. They're kind of like parenthood. Okay, so there's no way to get sort of an elaborate picture of what it means to become a parent until you actually become a parent. Now, you can, of course, read literature about that, all different aspects of parenting, sociology, psychology, physiology, and so forth. But you actually enter, the process of being a parent through becoming a parent. Okay, and obviously there's a lot of insecurity in the beginning, because if it is something that you haven't experienced before, it's natural for us to feel a little insecure, and to listen to what others tell us. And that's kind of like how spirituality has been conserved. Our spiritual wisdom has conserved mainly through basically our elders, our ancestors, telling others about all these secrets, and all these things that require years, and sometimes even lifetimes to study, just so that the following generations can take advantage of that and build on that. And this is something that we don't really appreciate nowadays, honestly, because we take so many of these spiritual concepts that, be it religions, or spiritual teachers, or coaches, or whatever, put out there, and we literally believe that they invented this. Okay, but the truth of the matter is that this is a very long tradition. So for as long as humans, have had an awareness, they have asked these kind of questions, and it is sort of almost like state of the art. Okay, to see, our humanhood, once you've agreed to the fact, or once you've agreed to the assumption, let's call it an assumption until you have your own experience of that there's more to our life than just the physical experience. Okay, there's also an emotional experience, and there's an mental, intellectual experience of that, and there even is, and this is the interesting thing, sort of a soul experience. Okay, so soul experience is not unique to spiritually awakening people. A soul experience is actually something that most people, according to statistics, I think it's 80 or 85% of people agree to, that there is something in them Yeah, like even without naming it soul, or without naming it consciousness, or there's something in them, all right, that feels very unique and very individual, something that we call spiritual identity. Okay, something that gives a person an identity beyond just, what in psychology would be called personality traits. There's something that we would perhaps today call something like the essence of a person, not the essence of you, the culmination of all the values and all, sort of the deeper thoughts that you have, that even if you and I studied the exact same thing, and perhaps even grew up in the same town, and have very similar circumstances, your way of looking at life will still be very unique to you, and so will my view on life. And so, there's a lot here that we still need to uncover, even if we've been on this journey, of investigating, things such as meaning of life and purpose of life, and all that, to fully understand the bigger picture. And this is just something that I wanted to send up front here, because there's an enormous body of spiritual wisdom, which is culminated in the word esoterica, or esoteric knowledge. Okay, yeah, esoteric, because in the olden days, this kind of knowledge was not really shared with everybody, not because people weren't supposed to know this. This is often how this conspiratorial view, of nowadays interprets it. But basically, because you only had a very, very tiny fraction of the population who could even read or write, who could even, intellectually follow those kind of conversations. Okay, it was only those who had dedicated their lives to studying that, and to coming up with, things that, were somewhat, reasonable, somewhat understandable, somewhat duplicatable. And so it was only those scholarly type of people, or people like monks or priests or high priests, that dedicated their entire life, yeah, to studying and conserving that kind of knowledge, so that it could be preserved, so that it could be delivered to the next generations. Okay, so no matter what spiritual, uh, uh, say, direction, yeah, or interpretation you're gravitating toward, there is a view, that allows us to recognize that there's got to be some kind of plan here. There's got to be some kind of hierarchy here, yeah, or else it's not explainable that thousands of years of human consciousness investigation have actually come up with very, very similar, experiences and interpretations. Okay, so this is really important for all of us to understand, no matter how we personally got into spirituality. Now, at this point, and when the microphone wasn't working, I was sharing with you how I experienced my own spiritual awakening, and my journey to, you know, seeing myself, in this position that I could compile this kind of material and share it with you. So obviously, I've spent the last 20 years of my life as a spiritual counselor and an energy coach, and that obviously gives me a very good picture of what it is that people experience, what it is that bothers people, that that the themes that come up for people. All right, so that's the clinical, the practical aspect that I can offer. I can give you, stats. I can say, well, yeah, 70% of the people I talk to, have this or this problem, or 80%, well, half and half, go through this, and the other half goes through that. This is something that I can offer, obviously, as sort of an actual experience that I have. Okay. The other aspect is that just like you know, and this is something that I was referring in our previous workshops already, you know, there seems to be a correlation between adversities in life, yeah, so things that we experience as like the sort of the curveballs of life or the challenges that come our way, yeah, and the depth of that experience, and sort of the willingness to go beyond just what you know we are basically told, or what we're just sort of the superficial um, contextualization of life. All right. So whenever our life deviates from, you know, like say the quote unquote sort of normal path, all right, is when, you know, these deeper questions in us come up. In short, it is, you know, our traumas, it is experiencing our shadows, it is experiencing disappointments, regrets, pain, okay, that you know, drives us to wanting to investigate, you know, these deeper questions in life. So we don't like hearing that, because obviously we all want to believe in this um, sort of anecdotal bliss, okay, that comes over us, you know, this an angel choir singing when we connect with spirit, when we become spiritual. And here's also one of the societal issues that we've already touched upon, namely, you know, the expectations that we have when we enter, you know, this, you know, sort of spiritual investigation. All right, you know, and sort of the projections that we have, maybe the hopes and so forth that, you know, us connecting with something higher, or us understanding ourselves better, or understanding other people better, would, you know, lead to some kind of miraculous, you know, elevation, okay, and that we no longer have to go through, you know, the 3D sufferings, the 3D struggles of life. And I'm sure, you know, at this advanced level, you guys are all already sober enough to understand that, you know, spiritual awakening is not like a drug, or like something, you know, like a wand, okay, that it takes all pain away, or that alleviates you from having to go through things. Spiritual awakening, and then the consecutive investigation, and you know, diving into the deeper experience, and understanding yourself to the point where you really can feel your own essence and your own values, yeah, such as, you know, kindness and sharing, and you know, sort of a warm-hearted um, understanding of what it means to be human, yeah, and the compassion for other people's experience, which is fundamentally, you know, where spirituality leads you to. It leads you to, you know, opening your heart and understanding, you know, the world, and these worldly experiences from a deeper place. Okay, once you arrive at that stage of your spiritual awakening, okay, then you can go deeper into asking bigger questions, you know, about the universe, the cosmos, you know, is there a plan? What is, you know, the purpose of all of this? And nowadays we also have other issues that come into our misconception of spirituality, and that has to do with, you know, a lot of watering down and profaning of spiritual information and spiritual concepts that have been, you know, studied and preserved and purified over thousands of years. And on the other hand, also the conspiracies, you know, and the marketing, you know, that's behind of that, where certain sort of spiritual concepts are being hijacked, yeah, with a tiny little speck of truth in them, so that they kind of trigger a little bit of your heart, you know, as in like, you know, this feels kind of good, or this sounds right, you know, within me. But then, you know, lead you, as I so often call this, into wrong exit, like to signing up for something, or to, having to, uh, maybe act against some of your deeper values, or, confusing or distracting you to a point where you lose your spiritual identity again. So here in this advanced series, it is not really just about your personal experience, but it is the point where you need to basically draw up something like your own spiritual biography. If you want to understand things such as, karma and the cosmic plan, and where all this is leading, for the world and humanity, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to be able to see your own, this lifetime, okay, as sort of part of that. You're gonna have to see yourself within your own spiritual identity, within your own spiritual uniqueness, as part of a greater development. Yeah. And it's a huge shift in a person's spiritual journey when they, grow up, similar to, when we, evolve or graduate from, childhood into teenagehood and into adolescence. Okay. This is when we begin to see the bigger realities. We begin to see that, oh yeah, childhood was so nice. We didn't really have to care for, you didn't really have to worry about how to bring food on the table, how to, provide housing, and, how to, do all these chores and stuff like that. We just had to be. But the older we get, the more we understand about the mechanics of livelihood and so forth, and it pulls us, it forces us into more responsibility. And it's very similar with the spiritual journey, except for one thing, and that is that, with the spiritual journey, we actually have a choice. With our physical development and our psychological development, we don't really have a choice. So we can't really choose to stay at the stage of a 5-year-old. Your body is going to, go into puberty, and your body is going to, develop into a mature body, and eventually it's going to age, and eventually, it's going to, decay. That's part of this sort of finite, material truth. And that is something that, we all struggle with, because there's a part in us, yeah. And if you're a little older, you can probably understand this a little better. There's a part in us that doesn't actually age. There's a part in us, yeah, that always kind of stays the same. Yeah, the essence of us. All right. So if I look at my spiritual journey, which I can look back and see from my perspective today as part of my spiritual journey. At the time, I did not. At the time, I just thought that everybody goes through these things. But I can now clearly see, how these were all, sort of part of the plan already. As a young child, being Icelandic, growing up in Iceland, which, basically follows fundamentally sort of pagan Christianity. Yeah, so the pagan version of Christianity. So we believe in God, we believe in Jesus Christ. It's more sort of on the Lutheran, liberal side of Christianity. But we also believe in elves and trolls, and the old gods, and like elementals, nature spirits, and so forth. I grew up with that. And my daydreaming and my fantasies as a child were, sort of me running through the woods, collecting mushrooms, talking to the birds, talking to the bugs, and and my biggest dream, yeah, as a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, was to be able to talk to animals. No kidding, it still is. And I'm still doing all these things. Okay, so my biggest dream was, to really connect, with my environment, and also with other people. But I found it a lot easier to connect with nature and with animals. So that's where I felt at home. And then as I grew older and, went into puberty and stuff, like, and I started to experience meanness of people, like, you know, not evilness, but just people being mean and selfish. Yeah. I started asking all these questions. I was not brought up in a Christian context. We didn't go to church or anything like that, but there was no opposition to church either. So there was a clear understanding that there was a cosmic force, a God that brought everything into existence, and that we are sort of here to enjoy all this. And there was only one thing that I always found extremely interesting about church, which ended up me joining church, joining not as in like becoming a member or something, because where I'm from, you don't have to be a member to go to church. It's public. Everybody can go into any church. Joining the choir. The one thing about church that always fascinated me was the energy, the atmosphere, the ambiance in churches, and the music, and especially the singing. So for me, my entry into spirituality was through nature and through music, through singing. It felt utterly embracing and warm and at home, when I was, part of singing these hymns and all that. I did not really participate, especially not at that age. I didn't understand anything that was, said there and taught there. My job was just to sing. And even today, when I talk about it, I can still feel the warmth in me, okay, through that. So that's, how I got into, like considering, the beauty and considering the goodness of things. All right. And as I went through, just like everybody, through the experience of, finding my social identity and, my place in society and so forth, I pulled more and more inward. I really did not want or didn't see myself as part of what everybody else was doing. This didn't fit. This wasn't warm. This wasn't the only thing that I could still sort of see as something where I could feel grounded, or where I could find something that would quench, this inner yearning for answers, was science. So very early, in middle school, I decided to become a scientist. I decided to become a chemist and to do all these college courses and, throughout high school, and, basically enter college with already a degree. And then I felt empty, because there I felt the coldness of science. And I had all this connection with, again, nature and even minerals and biology and biochemistry, and, wanting to understand how life works. But I found science, especially in college, utterly cold and utterly abrasive, to a point where I did not, or I could not see myself as a scientist anymore. I did not want to be that. Okay, I was looking for role models, and I found actually, surprisingly, many scientists who had very similar considerations. You'd be surprised today if you actually do investigation into like people like Charles Darwin or even Albert Einstein, or these icons of materialism. Um, what their spiritual considerations were. They were, very cool spiritual considerations. They were just never really regarded. They just took, sort of their theories and singled them out. So meanwhile, okay, I've had devastating and utterly graphic and scary visuals in my dreams, in, I would call daydreaming as a kid, and in, like whenever I basically closed my eyes. Whenever I closed my eyes, all I could see was what I would nowadays identify as demonic entities, as mayhem, bloodshed, and, I mean, destruction. Okay. And this weighed on my psyche. Okay, it was very hard for me to reconcile that on this like worldly level, I felt this warmth and this beauty in nature and music, and even in science to a degree, investigating how everything works. And on the other hand, whenever I closed my eyes, whenever I went to sleep, okay, all I could see was basically the underworld. And this made me very confused. It did not lead to me, um, you know, going overboard, and I don't know. It's very hard to describe. I had nobody to talk to about these things, so all I could do really, seen from my sort of 12 or 13-year-old perspective, was number one, don't go to sleep. Yeah, so I didn't want to go to sleep. I'm still working with this nowadays, and learn how to meditate, learn how to control these inner thoughts and visions, and all these emotions, okay, that came up along with this. And then I investigated, just like you, all different streams, popular authors, workshops, retreats, okay, plant medicines and all that. And basically from the age of like 16, 17, 18 till the age of 40, I just gathered experiences, tried all different kinds of techniques, remote viewing, all these things that kind of what I know now, helped me to develop and to refine and to purify my spiritual organs in me, because there was something in me that could always perceive. I just didn't know how to use it. I didn't know what it meant, and I was totally overwhelmed by it as a child. And so instead of going into fear, I decided to learn about it. I decided to study it. I decided to experience it, to practice it. And just like, how I became a mother, I just, basically dove into it and tried to learn it as I went. And in the course of that, bit by bit, this is, now 4 decades of study, I investigated all different, or not all, many different angles of spirituality, and develop my spiritual organs to a point that I could control them, in a controlled setting, in what we call energy sessions, that I could do this basically at will, that I could, be of service, that I could function as a guide, that I could, do readings and things like that, and I'd say the last 15 years, to really give me a, a picture, of where all of this is going for us as humans. Yeah, to understand, like, okay, I don't know how the cosmos works or anything like that. Okay, all I know is what other people think about this, but I have an inner experience of that. And when I read something or when I see something that somebody else shares, and that is something that I have seen with my own inner eyes, that is information that I have received through my own inner experience, okay, then I follow it. And this is basically what I would like to suggest to you, that likewise, you don't just blindly trust everything I say. Yeah, that you question all of this, that you ask lots of questions, and that you ask me how I got there, and what happened, and so forth, and that just like as if it was, what's it like to become a parent, or what's it like to do this or that, to do bungee jumping, or to go skydiving, or what's it like to visit New Zealand, or whatever. Yeah, that you form your own understanding through your own experience. And some things we won't be able to experience ourselves, such as, visiting, hell worlds. We talked about this last time a little bit at the very end, that, all these, uh, you know, archetypal understandings of, the supernatural, the subnatural, that, they are sort of part of our human experience. All right. So this is not just the works of one person, that is, like a culminated sort of wisdom that we as a whole humanity, okay, accumulate, over the course of time. And the further we progress in our sort of consciousness development, the more we as individuals can access. Okay, so it is understandable that in the 21st century, that we have different questions than people, at the end of the 19th century, when electricity was invented or became popular, or the people around the time, 2,000 years ago, of Christ's appearance, or the time, 1400 years ago, Muhammad's experience, Buddha's experience, appearance, and so forth. You know what I mean? We have a different perspective. We have a different sort of catalog and a different lexicon, all right, to access, even if we're not fully aware of it. And so, by sharing my own journey here, I'm hoping to also help you with the transparency of your own journey. Yeah, it's sort of your own spiritual biography that you now, become able to draw. Yeah, I can now see why I had to go through certain things in my youth. Why, how, like, having been born into this Icelandic tribal environment, and then later the German influence, in my teenagehood and early adulthood, and the American influence through living here. And so why all that had to be that way, I can all see all that. As I went through it, of course, I struggled with each of these different stages of my development. But the more I put sort of my spiritual biography together, the more I can see how all this makes sense. And then, when you become able to do this, guys, no matter what your personal circumstances are, when you see, aha, this is here the task, this is my task, and there's got to be some kind of plan there, that I was already following, okay, when I was talking, to the mushrooms, at the age of 5 or 6. Do you know what I mean? That's very unique to me. That is sort of my higher self already, sort of nudging me, speaking through me. And it's very interesting for me today as a teacher, not just for grown-ups, but also for children, to see how much of that already sort of comes through at a very early age. It's just that we then later sort of get distracted from it. And it usually takes us until our 40s, to rediscover that. Yeah. So, as a kindergarten teacher, it's very, I want to say, almost fulfilling for me, to reinforce, these kind of impulses when they come up in kids, and basically tell them already how important these things are going to be later without knowing anything about their future biography, But I know that when their higher self is speaking through them, okay, that has significance for them. And the more we can become aware of that throughout our lifetime, the better we will then also understand other people's lives. And this whole issue with our relationships, and the fear of making mistakes, and the fear of being responsible for other people's lives and so forth, it helps us to actually process that, and to begin to understand that each and every one of us is guided through their own higher self, which is guided through divine consciousness. But it's their own higher self, okay, that guides them through the lifetime here, all right, with a purpose, with a, certain, I want to say, learning experience. And this learning experience is very unique to each and every one of us. On the big picture, we all, seen from the big picture perspective, we all on the same journey. But when it comes to like the stages that we go through and the order that we go through things, that can vary greatly. And so we can only look at other people's experience as a piece of wisdom, as a piece of, like ingested sort of, maybe something like a reflection. Yeah, even if it ends up in us becoming able to understand ourselves through knowing what is not our journey. Yeah, sometimes that's a way to better understand yourself as well. Yeah, through seeing other people's journey and being grateful that you don't have that experience, or something like that. All right, and that it's really your own journey that you need to focus on, even though we're all connected. So there's a lot of talk here, but I felt that this was appropriate to actually share, my journey here for you, so that you can see that what I'm presenting here is really the way I have experienced it and the way I have understood it from the study that I have done. And really also the impulse to you to do your due diligence. All right. When you hit this advanced stage of your journey, you should never use any spiritual terms without knowing exactly what they mean. And that is, basically my goal here, to help you to build this, this inner lexicon, not just of your own inner experiences and sensations, but also the lexicon of a very clear understanding of what these spiritual concepts actually mean that you are referring to. So in these past workshops here and the parallel workshop of spiritual awakening issues, beginning issues, we've illuminated the afterlife and what happens when we die. All right. So this is assuming that we all believe that there is, something after we die. In other words, that there is some kind of spirit being in us that does not die when our body dies. Okay, and the spirit being we usually call the soul. Um, and in this the first sort of intuitive understanding of soul, all right, it's not further investigated. We just call that which we feel as non-material in us to this essence. Okay, we name the soul. But when you investigate spiritual concepts, and especially when you go into spiritual science, you'll see that there's different kinds of souls in you. All right, they have different aspects. All right, they don't just relate to sort of the angel wing you, okay, but different aspects of your soul that need to be developed, over time, just like how our physical existence doesn't just consist of our body. It consists of our body and also our psyche, okay, that is, the conjoined sort of intellectual mental experience of ourselves and emotional experience of ourselves. So just like our physical life has these three different layers of experience. Yeah, you can experience your life through your physical sensations, your physical senses, yeah, and your physical pain or your physical well-being. You can experience your life through your emotions, yeah, through how it makes you feel inside yourself, and through how you think about things, okay, your mental, your intellectual, and cognitive abilities. In that same way, our soul is also divided into, these different sort of aspects of itself. And, we call them, the intellectual soul, and we call them the feeling soul, and we call them the consciousness soul, which are basically, if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, the higher developed, the higher refined versions, okay, of your, sort of what you experience as you here in this physical world. It's the higher versions of that. And I said earlier that there's one big difference in our spirit, in our physical development with our, mind and emotion, uh, and our spiritual journey. And that is that with our physical development, the lifetime, the physical material lifetime, let's say 80 years or 90 years, we don't really have a choice. Okay, so we're born as an infant, and then we develop into a toddler, then we develop into a child, then we develop into a teenager, adolescent, then a mature, grown up, and then like an elderly person. We don't really have a choice. That development is happening for us. That is a, sort of very basic, fundamental process, a plan, if you will. And we, refer all this back to our DNA and say, okay, this is all pre-planned through our DNA. Okay, so far, we all agree, I suppose. When it comes to our spiritual self and our spiritual identity, it gets a little more complex. Okay, because first of all, we have a choice. Nobody has to develop a sort of spiritual view on things. We don't have to. We can if we want to. We all have the ability to do that, though. Everybody can have these spiritual considerations. Not everybody perhaps interprets their experiences as spiritual experiences. That may come later in hindsight. You can look back and say, you know what, that was actually really deep spiritual experience back then when I was a child. Yeah, I didn't see it as such, but now I realize that was already sort of, my higher self or the cosmos or God or whatever. It's sort of speaking through me. Yeah, but we still have to choose that. We still have to choose, to uh, investigating and asking those kind of questions in life. We have to choose to, really wanting to understand ourselves. I mean, if sorry, if we choose not to do that, and just basically stay spiritual infants or spiritual children, then we don't really have to step into the responsibility that comes with it, as I laid it out earlier, in those chores and responsibilities of making your livelihood. It's the same in spirituality. You don't really have to become an individual. You don't have to make your own choices. You can just sort of go by the societal plan, kind of what, everybody does, quote unquote, and, just sort of follow the trodden path. Anybody who wakes up to a reality where following the trodden path is not for them will then automatically begin to ask questions, will basically begin spiritual investigation. And like I've mentioned earlier, that can come through trauma and adversity in most of our cases, or, sometimes in, early deep spiritual experiences that perhaps help you through really dark times. Yeah, so the dark night of the soul as a spiritual awakening tool is very, very common, guys. So if any of you here dread the fact that you have to go through these deep, dark experiences as a spiritual person, I can only congratulate you. All right, because it is exactly in those times where you are closer to yourself than you think you are. Okay, it is merely the ego mind and the ego that rejects or resists, going through that that a deeper investigation, because it also requires, some other tools, and these tools are the ones that we are out to acquire on this advanced spiritual journey, namely the spiritual organs that we need to develop to be able to navigate, to bring light into this dark night of the soul, the darkness, okay, that is also out there, the one that I reported to you that I was confronted with at a very early stage without knowing what it was. Okay, so we need a flashlight there. We need to, basically ignite our own inner light to be able to navigate that, which means that we have to investigate, what connects us to the light, and what are these mechanics, okay, that distract us from the light. Basically, we need to learn, what darkness is, okay, and how it works through us, and, you know, what, actually cures, and this is the link to the afterlife, when we enter, okay, this sort of what appears as dark, spiritual realm. And that is basically why we're also afraid of death, because for as long as we live, okay, we still have our ego mind, our ego awareness to hang on to, and we can say, okay, yeah, I know what I'm experiencing. I can see it with my eyes. I can touch it with my fingers. But as soon as that physical life is no longer there to give us a framework for life, we are basically tapping in darkness. So the question of what happens when we die is directly linked with our spiritual journey, because the spiritual journey is the one that triggers the ability to actually navigate, what happens when we die. All right. And the simplest way of remembering this is that, everything that you acquire here in this lifetime, say, as your spiritual wisdom, as your own, self sort of experience and acquired, self-chosen spiritual wisdom, is what turns on your light, okay, when you die. Now you can ask, what happens if somebody doesn't want to, investigate these things and doesn't care about, what happens after death? That's totally fine. What happens then is pretty much exactly what you experience as the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is an experience of tapping in the dark, not understanding or not knowing, the purpose of what you were experiencing. Does this make sense, guys? Yeah, the dark night of the soul is basically, being blind in, the spiritual sort of cosmos that is out there. Yeah, and this blindness, okay, fills us with fear, fills us with agony. And this is what our lifetime, our physical lifetime, provides us with an opportunity to refine our spiritual organs and to get to know all these different dangers, and also, understand, where to go and where not to go. Okay, it's kind of like, a little kid, that wakes up, or I don't know, I had this when I made my driver's license, even though I was a passenger, and watched my friends and my mother drive all the time. The moment I had a driver's license, I had to navigate. The world looked completely different for me. And back in the days, we did not have phones with GPS, so you had to have like paper maps next to you, and literally, uh, stop at the gas station to ask the clerk, where to get to things. And it was really, really difficult and very scary for me. The navigation of streets, all right, was way more scary for me than, other things in life. So that's kind of what it's like when we choose not to care about spirituality and these kind of questions of afterlife and so forth. Really, all it means is that we are, that we still have ways to learn, that we still need to learn a lot. That's really all it is. And, we have tons of lifetimes to take care of that. So there's no judgment in that. So never judge anyone, okay, who chooses not to be, spiritual, who chooses not to have these kind of spiritual discussions. It's totally okay to choose not to enter that discussion. Now, the bigger issue actually is entering that discussion, but with not internalized or not experienced or not really felt aspects of spirituality. This, in my view and my experience nowadays, is a much bigger issue. That we have a lot of people out there who throw all these spiritual terms around, even social media, PR, marketing, is hijacking all these spiritual terms such as karma, chakras, in astrology, we've seen this this watering down and this profaning of, these deep spiritual concepts for a long time already. But this is now actually also happening with energy, and this is happening with shaman and with, all these terms. Okay, all of a sudden, everybody's a shaman. Everybody knows how to do energy healing, and everybody is like healing something. And the word healing is basically profane nowadays, because it's no longer, about entering this or choosing to enter this really conscious process. It's just basically a way of either attention grabbing or clickbaiting, or sort of getting justifications for sort of your entitlement. Okay, that yeah, I matter too, or everybody should take care or should heed my sensitivities because it's my wound and it's my healing process. Okay, these are all very, very dangerous developments in spirituality, guys, because they profane. Yeah, they make it ridiculous. Okay, what this spiritual journey is actually about. So how do we learn to discern, to become aware, of the pitfalls and the temptations and the dangers, yeah, of navigating this spiritual world? Well, this is a very difficult question, and cannot really be answered in one, not even one workshop. There's a bunch of workshops about the nature of darkness and how to discern darkness and so forth. And it is fundamentally the result of our spiritual journey is that we get a really, really solid understanding, of what light is and what dark is. What is life promoting, what is life giving, yeah, what is loving, what is supporting, and what is basically anti-life, yeah, and life degrading, and parasitic and vampiric. Those are very, very, rough, definitions, just to mark the extremes here. Yeah, but it becomes way more complex when you enter the spiritual world with, you're developing spiritual organs, and you begin to see dark forces that don't actually relate to you personally anymore. You see things like darkness in the world, evil forces and things like that. Can you guys, are you guys still here? Can you guys give me a hand sign? Who of you has ever felt like and not things from movies or something, but like actually, that there's a lot of darkness in this world, that there's, like other forces out there that are influencing people, not just, their own personal belief system, but that there's actually something working from the outside. Yeah, and some of us have a very visceral experience of darkness or dark forces working through humans or humanity, like myself, like I've experienced. I know that many of you have had that too. All right, and so you can speak out of your own experience, really, that dark forces exist, and rejecting the knowledge of dark forces, or even ignoring, or just simply refusing to accept that there is darkness, which is very common, and kind of like where this is all going nowadays, is not protecting you from them. Okay, so this is like one of these really discomforting truths that we discover on our spiritual journey, that you can refuse to believe in dark forces, but that does not protect you from the temptations and compulsions and the confusions and distractions and the deceptions, as well, that dark forces use to work through you and to use your light. So fundamentally, when we talk about dark forces in its many different forms that we've investigated in part 2, the subnatural forces that were also layered, and where there's also a spiritual hierarchy to them. What they basically do is that because they don't have light, okay, they have to get it from somewhere else. All right. And where can they get it? They can get it from, well, basically ignorant people. Okay, people, humans, that have no clue, all right, how valuable, how powerful their own light is, who are willing to give it away, for a few cookies, and an ice cream. Now, that's really sort of in a somewhat graphic way, how this all works. Yeah, this is how dark forces work for us. They actually, more or less built on our ignorance. And that's why, when you look at spiritual teachings over the centuries, over the millennia, all right, they have developed too. They have developed, into a very elaborate, very, sort of intellectually sound concepts. But the closer they get to basically nowadays, okay, the civilization, the Western civilizations, and the Western science and Western spirituality, with the entering of Christ, okay, it's basically the sort of the beginning of Western spirituality, if you will. We also now have a somewhat of a roadmap or an understanding of how darkness works that wasn't there before, guys. All right, so we have to understand this. There's some very cool things that are going on there, as far as like how this esoteric wisdom is, acquired and then released into our human culminated consciousness, always sort of based on our abilities. So the more we develop our own spirituality, and with it our spiritual side, our spiritual organs, and so forth, the more we, as a human, as a human sort of collective, uncover, and it becomes part of our, human, our collective human consciousness, and therefore accessible for us. And where we are at in our consciousness development right now, where it's important for us to discern, darkness from light. Okay, yeah, basically what I often call the confrontation with untruths, the confrontation with unlove and unfreedom. Yeah, these three pillars: truth, freedom, and love. All right, that allow us to spiritually grow, and that allow us to, basically expand and, evolve into our next sort of spiritual adulthood, if you will. They are, in a test phase right now. Okay, so we have to learn how to discern that was not really possible for us in the past. And that's why when we look into history, why we have all these, like, really terrible, kind of, like the Crusades and stuff like that, like the terrible expressions of spiritual misunderstandings, because that ability to discern between dark and light wasn't fully developed yet. Okay, and that is basically where we're standing right now. The terms the term etherization, okay, is a very specific sort of spiritual or esoteric lingo word, okay, which means nothing else than, us spiritualizing ourselves again. Okay, us moving out of this materialistic understanding of ourselves, which has become very limiting. Okay, yeah, when we only see ourselves as a body with no soul, or a body with a tiny soul, all right, then, we are not actually able to further evolve. All right, so it is, in that sort of spiritual awakening that we're experiencing right now, globally or collectively, that we are spiritualizing ourselves. And the way this happens, okay, the mechanism of that is that we are becoming aware of our etheric body, of our etheric energy, all you guys here, my audience here in the Sacred Self-Healing community is an audience that has become aware and that has been training, okay, without you maybe being able to articulate it this way, but it has been training, all right, to interact and to work with their own etheric energy, yeah, as a means of self-healing. This is just a tiny part of self-healing, really. So, whenever you think, oh, I've got this, okay, yeah, I'm a pro at self-healing, okay, what's going to happen is that just like how this happens as above, so below, all right, you're going to get new challenges. You're going to get, new things that you have to learn to navigate, okay, and that then challenges these spiritual abilities or your higher faculties to develop. Okay, so this is a really, really fundamental concept that we need to understand, and like how spirituality works versus how materialism works. Okay, in materialism, all right, everything is linear and builds upon one another and is tied to a timeline. In spirituality, we are not bound to time and space. So, in other words, if I have a huge spiritual insight, okay, that I'm sharing with you, okay, this allows you to partake in that. It allows you, okay, to access that kind of, sort of thought field, that consciousness field that I have opened up, kind of like a map that I have opened up, okay, with my light, and I'm sharing this with you, okay, and that allows you to see that part of the map as well. And right now, and this is something that most of you know, because this is what I have been teaching for the last 20 years, how to navigate, your own etheric energy and also, the outer worlds and outer dimensions, okay, that require some of these navigation abilities, some of these faculties, okay, and then ultimately also how to navigate astral worlds, by internalizing all these navigation skills, okay? Because you're gonna have to learn, first you're gonna have to learn how to drive forward, and then you're gonna have to learn how to, drive left and right, and and then you have to learn how to go up and down, and then you have to learn, how to actually, do something I guess you would call like dimensional shifts. And then you have to learn, to let go of, all the things that you've acquired and be willing to enter a space that we call void and no longer having any of this framework that you're using to understand yourself right now. All these things they take years to develop. Yeah. And as we were going through this together and sharing our experiences, we are opening more and more parts of this sort of bigger cosmic map, okay, that is out there. Yeah, and we can benefit from each other as well as all the people that were there before us and that will be there in the future. Okay, so this is another of these big spiritual concepts, okay, that we then, the process of going through all these different steps of development and acquiring, a higher perception, what we call a spiritual initiation, is fundamentally a process that cannot be done on your own. It cannot be done on your own. Okay, this is a collective process, all right, but it happens through your own volition. It happens through you freely choosing to wanting to do that. Okay, and that's a difference to our material life. Our material life is not chosen. You don't choose to grow up, and anyone who tries to stop that from happening, okay, yeah, and I'm sure some of you know personal examples in your life, okay, of people who choose to get stuck in, the 5-year-old state or, the teenage state, okay, it brings in major imbalances in a person's life, psychological issues, physical issues, emotional issues, and so forth, not to mention all the gender confusion and things like that. All right, so the physical development and with it, the faculties that we get for free, so to speak, okay, our five senses and some basic ego understanding and our basic needs. These things, they're in there, basically as our sort of biologically pre-programmed things. But everything beyond that, has to be chosen to be developed. Yeah, your consciousness, starting with moral considerations and considerations outside of yourself. This is basically where spirituality already starts. Okay, it starts with anything that has to do with how does that make the other person feel. Okay, how does that affect the world? Those are spiritual considerations, guys. Yeah, just so you know. And that's why it is often the onset of empathy. Yeah, first compassion, forgiveness, and then empathy. All right, that also further drives our spiritual initiation process. And it is so that the further advanced you are in your spiritual initiation, the more empathy you will develop as a faculty. Okay, you will develop more empathy, but at the same time, you will also have learned the tools to manage your empathy. So most of us have experienced trauma because we woke up to our energetic sensitivity or woke up to our visual capabilities, or woke up to our empathy, but haven't learned the tools to manage it yet. Okay, and this is why we're here. Okay, so these spiritual organs that I often report about, those are, your more considerations, your compassion, your willingness to, basically make good. Yeah, so it's sometimes hard to express that in words, but to better yourself, to improve your own life and maybe also the life of others, to share, yeah, to have compassion for others, and to ultimately be a person that experiences life through that inner sort of warmth that you get when in a form of elation, really, that you get when you have your own inner insights, when you learn something new, be it about the world or other people. Okay, and this entire process of humanity that leads to us spiritualizing again, okay, is in this phase of human conscious development called etherization. So we are, basically becoming aware of our own etheric body through our physical. We are in our physical, through our physical, we are developing the spiritual organs to understand and also to manage, to master our etheric. And that has huge consequences in sort of the bigger, sort of in the bigger sort of initiation, not just the individual spiritual initiation where we all learn to form our own spiritual ID, but also for the human collective development. Yeah, and this is something, just to give you guys a bit of a ballpark here, probably something that we're going to be spending, the next 2,000 years with as a humanity. Okay. Yeah, so we are basically pioneers into that already have the onset of these spiritual organs that, or who need to learn how to manage them. That is why we're here. The role of the true self in this awakening process is, basically just sort of our approximation. We have to first overcome, all the limitations, the deceptions, the temptations, the compulsions, and also the confusions, of this limited ego understanding of ourselves, yeah, which does not fully understand moral considerations. It does not fully understand the concepts of, sharing, mutuality, equality, and compassion, really. All right, and selflessness. All right, these are all basically concepts that we learn through our own spiritual initiation process, however we get there. Okay, yeah, some of us have early spiritual experiences where we get sort of glimpses, yeah, of what this could be. Some of us awaken to spiritual sight or clear audience, or some sort of accidental higher faculties without knowing what all this means. All right, and some of us, like myself, it's very common, awaken to these spiritual organs through the confrontation with darkness. Yeah, yeah, to actually have been in the dark night of a soul, to actually have been, found yourself, caught in hell walls, and being confronted with these dark energies, forces, and entities. All right, and having to learn, yeah, how to deal with them. Yeah, being forced to learn how to deal with them. Just like on the physical level, how we, learn self-defense. Yeah. Martial arts, for example, is a very good comparison, to what it takes to form our spiritual organs. And martial arts is very related to that in the physical. Now it's all about gaining self-control. Self-control stands in self-regulation. Yeah? And that's what, our spiritual initiation, no matter how we get there, does for us. It teaches us how to do that. It teaches us, how to deal with certain things still within our own individual, understanding. And that individual understanding, that essence of ourselves, as I called it earlier, that's represented in the term true self. It is that part of you that doesn't really change. It isn't really changing. If you, do this spiritual biography that I suggested earlier, you'll see that some of these really sort of essential things about you, who you are, they're the same when you were 5 years old. Maybe, you had a lot of fear and you had a lot of distraction and all that, and that caused you, to handle certain things in certain ways, psychologically, sociologically. But the essence of you, like who you were in your true self, okay, the human that you are, that actually did not change. So that's a little bit room for contemplation for you here, okay? Really, what is your true self? And why so many spiritual teachings, including myself, like point at, this connection and this relationship with your true self so much, why we emphasize that so much. Because the first part of your journey is really just trying to understand your own experience. And in order to understand your own experience, you're going to have to be willing to look at your own essence. Christ consciousness, a word that is also watered down and, quite often, profaned in many different ways, because it has become, like one of those words like goddess and God and divine and source and warrior this and so forth, is, fundamentally nothing but the deep spiritual impulse, the impulse through your own heart, through your own center, okay, to consider the world, to consider others, to consider the well-being of others, to consider, all right, what it does to you, okay, when you have to watch somebody else suffering. to live a life in compassion and empathy, and not just wanting to understand yourself better, but also wanting to understand others and the whole entire experience better. Yeah, beyond yourself. It's the impulse to care for something outside of yourself. That is, in almost like a psychological sense, how I can best describe, the Christ impulse, which, by the way, is the alignment that I composed for this month of April 24. The Christ impulse. It's not the same as the Christ consciousness, but the Christ impulse is, that which is working through us, yeah, as the forces of light, if you will. Yeah. And how can you feel that? Through your considerations of others, through your compassion, through, your spiritual values, even if you're not fully aware of that. Yeah. The goodness in your heart, if you will. The problem only is it's not enough to just feel that. There's also, the need to learn how to navigate this world. So we all know what happens to people who just walk through life, believing in all the good and, well, being confronted with all this untruth and all this unlove and unfreedom in life. So we have to kind of up, our abilities. We have to sort of, up our game here, with the amount of distraction and confusion, deception and untruth that surrounds us right now, the amount of toxicity, that is in our societies, okay, on all different levels, the amount of divergence, if you will, the amount of, like us really falling apart rather than growing closer together. With that, in our, with that being what we're confronted with, okay, it is no longer enough to just gaze into the spiritual world. It is now, in sort of a higher level of consciousness that needs to come to us, where we need to realize that we need to, do something about this. We got to, like, sort of, step, maybe out of our own sort of individualized, just trying to make it through our life, and rather, see that there are new ways or new approaches that are needed to resolve that, yeah, to work through that together, to collaborate, to allow, sort of our culminated wisdom and also, our intellects and our bodies and our emotions to work together, with one common aligned goal. And that alignment, okay, that is what we are, here now learning. What am I aligning myself to? With this or this or this thought, sentiment, or choice. And as soon as you begin to understand this sort of here as above, so below, okay, and the hierarchies that are at play here, yeah, that are sort of trying to get the upper hand in the material world, at the battle in heaven, as they call it so often, the subnatural and the supernatural, that is basically trying to, sort of on one hand maintain a balance, but on the other hand also to provide protection for this human evolution. Yeah, so the human evolution is aligned to the light source that brings sort of more and more insight, that brings more and more illumination into the consciousness, versus the dark forces that are aligned to taking that away and basically sort of hijacking, human consciousness into, sort of their sort of lower vibratory kingdom, their subnatural world. And this happens, and this is basically here the end of this part 3, just to understand, what kind of complexity needs to be understood to even have that conversation. This happens through materialization, okay, the opposite of etherization, the opposite of spiritualization. Okay, so the more we materialize in our worldview, in our belief system and framework for life, the more we move into darkness. And here comes, the twist in all this. And this is something that I'm looking forward to further discussing in part 4, where I hope that you guys come up with your own questions. This largely happens right now, like in these last 150 years, through the electrification of our life. So the electrification of our life, it does something to our etheric energy that most of us are not aware of, okay? And that has to do with us not fully understanding what electricity actually is. The easiest way how I can explain it for you is that you look at electricity as sort of the decaying product of dying light. Yeah, this is a very, very simplistic way of seeing it, but really gets the concept across. Everybody knows the difference between artificial light and natural sunlight, right? And most of you guys are energetically sensitive, so you can even feel the difference on you. And I don't even want to go into the science of it, how important sunlight is for us, et cetera, et cetera. But I want you to understand the the scientific concept, okay, that electricity is dying light, okay? It is decaying light. And anything that dies and anything that decays belongs to the kingdom or the realm of the underworld, of the subnatural. So while electricity brings, a wonderful convenience and things into our lives that help us survive and cover our basic needs and also some of our higher needs. Okay, obviously, I am talking about electricity itself, but I'm also talking about all the other things that electricity has brought forward. So I'm not just talking about light bulbs and, power that comes out of your power plug and all your power-driven devices. I'm also talking about internet and, anything that we would nowadays call electronics. Okay, so electronics are, and any information that is transported through electronics, even me speaking, through this software and, my Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi, and so forth, lowers the information. It lowers the quality of the information, all right? Because it forces it, into this sort of lower vibratory, this may just be marginal right now because the content and the alignment of what is being spoken right now is so high that, it's still, doesn't really, become dark. But there's a lot of that we're seeing, especially nowadays, in social media and, media altogether, that must make us wonder, guys. So there is actually a real phenomenon now, and that is that through, shooting all these satellites into the Earth's atmosphere, by building all this glass fiber around the world through the oceans and so forth, all the Wi-Fi's, the 5Gs and so forth, we are creating a network, a grid of sort of an artificial electrical layer, okay, that influences, how light comes to us. It filters it. It no longer makes it, basically, it still is there. So the natural light is obviously there, okay, and we still have access, but we need higher faculties now to get to this sort of pure influx of light, okay, that we are all designed, okay, to, ingest, metabolize, and then internalize, yeah, as part of our spiritual evolution process. So I want to leave you guys here with this the conceptuation of, etherization versus electrification, and sort of the thought impulse that is behind that, namely, to look at, the collective rather than just your own spiritual journey. And, by putting these things together, as below or as above, so below, that, some of the things that you're experiencing in your personal journey might actually be related to those bigger, processes that humanity is going through, and vice versa, of course. But to understand your own journey also as part of a bigger evolutionary process. That's basically, in a nutshell, what spiritual science allows us to do, yeah, to look at life itself and all that it brings forward, including matter, as an evolutionary process, as, sort of part of a continual, a birth and decay process, yeah, the cycle or circle of life, and this continual evolution that occurs through going through these natural cycles. And dark forces, the subnatural, will basically trying to divert that away from the natural cycle into an artificial cycle. And this is basically the biggest danger, just the biggest darkness that we're facing right now. And if you are having experiences with or sensations or, like input here on that level where you're seeing certain things as dark, where other people, look at you like you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. On one hand, I want to reassure you that, there's something about that, all right, and that you shouldn't, think that there's something wrong with you. Okay. On the other hand, also to keep it grounded and not go into conspiracy theories with it, but rather really investigate the true concepts underneath all that. And once you do that, okay, you are beginning to learn how to discern darkness in its different expressions, and therefore also how to navigate darkness. Okay, so you no longer have to just buy what other people tell you to buy, or what other people tell you to believe in, or what's the best, or what's the biggest fad, or whatever. You can actually stand there, in your own spiritual identity and verify things for yourself. So this is at the end of part 4. Everyone, it was more of a lecture today, going through, really what truly matters, at a certain point of your spiritual investigation. And where, some of these more individual questions that we all have, why is this happening to me? Why is this right now? To not bypass that, but to elevate your game, to, maybe take some time and uh, draw up something like a spiritual biography, where you actually look at your own spiritual development as an evolutionary process, so that you can better understand, what these faculties, what these maneuvering abilities, what these these spiritual organs are that I am talking about, yeah, and how far you've already come, Yeah, like where you're at in that whole process, and what it actually is that you want to or need to acquire, all right, to up your game, yeah, to not get stuck in the same karmic and repetitive cycle, yeah, of re-experiencing sort of the same issues, the same adversities, and so forth over and over again. Yeah, to consciously witness your own spiritual evolution. Yeah, that's the goal. The goal of your life's experience, to eventually become able to witness your own spiritual evolution. So please, guys, take the opportunity to ask questions, to comment, to investigate, and maybe to also share your own. Maybe you have studied different mystic schools or teachings, all right, that bring in, you know, other viewpoints, that bring in different perspectives that have worked for you, that have, helped you to understand your own journey and humanity's journey better. Please share that with us. Like I said, we all learn, yeah, we're opening up that map, that roadmap, on how to navigate through darkness together. And with each of us contributing to this and engaging in it, all right, including our ancestors and forefathers, including all the ones that do this same process after we as in this physical, we are no longer here. We are all doing this together. Any any comments or questions that you have right now that you would like to share right now? Anybody?
Can you hear me, Jona?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, I just had a bit of an aha moment right on that very last sentence that you said in relation to retrocausality and how the the people who are coming from to us in the future are impacting our present moment now.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to describe. I'm finding it hard to put it in words, but I'm seeing a bigger picture of how that comes together with past, present, and future now.
Mm-hmm. It's just a feeling, Jared, right? It's
Yeah, yeah.
and it's totally okay. This is how our spiritual evolution works, guys. All right, you don't have to sound elaborate or scientific or whatever. It is a feeling, all right? And I know exactly which feeling you are referring to. And these kind of insights or aha moments, as you just called it, those are some of these most exquisite moments in our spiritual journey. They may not, be intellectually fully sort of understandable for us in that moment. We just feel it, okay? That there's something about that, yeah? There's sort of an inner confirmation of something. And that is what we're after, guys. That is what I'm referring to when I say upping our game, all right? To strengthen and refine and purify that inner sense that you just reported about. Yeah, there's something, an inner sense that you're developing right now that informs you when something feels right. Okay? And here within this context, that's enough. That's enough for you to verify that. You can use different words to describe it, and you can, put sort of your version, your rendering to it. But at the end of the day, anyone who's ever been there, who's ever experienced that, will understand it. It's so different, guys, from how we have been trained, to approach things, and how to, subscribe and align ourselves to things, based on, facts, whatever. All right. And, mind you, I'm a very factual person. And one of the things that I have spent, probably half of my life with was purifying my thinking. Okay. My intellectual thinking, to purify that. Yeah, to filter my opinions out, to filter my emotions out, and to, train myself, all right, to discern information. This whole section of mastering our thinking, yeah, which is another 4 hours plus 2 hour workshop, okay, experimental workshops, yeah, here on your YouTube channel or the Sacred Self Healing Archive. All right, that is the prerequisite. Okay, so our mind and our intellect is involved in this process, but the higher faculty of it. So you use word like retrocausality. It's a highly sort of lingo, intellectual lingo word, and really what you're referring to is this connection, like you said in your own words in the end, this connection between present, past, and future. We can somehow all feel that, but we can't really explain it because it, I guess, contradicts, sort of this Newtonian scientific paradigm that we're having. But be assured that when you enter, the spirit realm, and when you enter, your higher faculties, you are beginning to see a whole different version of science, of, how the universe works. And it does not contradict the Newtonian, what we call nature science. It doesn't contradict it. It implies it, but it doesn't contradict it. And yet it's much more expanded. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of scientific theories and stuff that have already more or less proven, that past, present, and future are connected. Okay, so we don't need to go into that. So as a humanity, we're at the verge, of discovering all these things. And it's a very exciting time because, it doesn't happen very often that, scientific paradigms are being revolutionized. This doesn't happen very often. So we are here at a time where that is happening in real time, where the electrification of our planet can be observed. Anybody who's older than 40 years old knows that because, just sort of the handheld devices and so forth, smartphones and so forth, we have actually lived through the evolution of that. And when I talk about, this grid and so forth forming, electrical grid forming throughout our planet, it's actually real. You can actually see that already from space. Okay, so these things already exist. This is not a conspiracy theory or something. All right, this is part of our, human collective karma to go through that and to learn how to use technology responsibly, how to, utilize, okay, some of the advantages, but without jeopardizing, okay, our spiritual health. Now, this is all stuff that our collective still has to figure out. But thank you, Jared, for sharing that. And retrocausality as an esoteric concept, the connection between present, past, and future, basically the non-existence of time, because time, it really is just a mental construct in the material world, is very profound and is needed to understand some bigger concepts in the cosmos. This whole question of what was there first, the chicken or the egg. It's an extremely important spiritual investigation. Yeah, what was there first, the light or the eye that can see the light? It's something that I could give you as a homework to contemplate about that. What was there first? Was the eye there first that could sense and see light, or was light there first? Which caused which? Yeah. So let's continue this discussion in part 4. All right, and I see you again in 2 weeks with the parallel workshop series, Spiritual Awakening Issues, where we are entering the segment of perception. All right, so as you will see that these workshops are aligned with one another, but they're looking at different levels of the same thing. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about, how our mind filters certain things and what this purification that I've talked about, yeah, how that actually happens, what techniques and traditions and modalities, okay, we can use to purify our perception, okay, uh, through mastering our thinking and mastering our feeling and mastering our willing. Yeah, these 3 pillars, of our spiritual initiation process. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for contributing, and thank you for your patience with the tech stuff that we had to deal with in the beginning. Yeah, I'm wishing you guys a beautiful contemplation. All right, what was there first, the chicken or the egg? And hopefully lots of questions, guys. Please investigate. There are some words that I'm using. I always make an effort to explain them, but I really want you to investigate them for yourselves and the concepts that are behind them. Some of you ask many questions in private, and I as much as I love answering private questions, I want these questions to be asked here within the community. We have a whole community, and all these people are part of your journey, guys. All right, whether you personally know them or not. So ask these questions in the daily sacred self. That's where, I would like to see much more discussion, okay, rather than just sort of the consumption of something that is being put out. Okay, so feel free to ask these kind of questions that come up in you, be it through your own personal journey or be it through studying, spiritual material, in the daily sacred self thread on Skype. Okay, thank you, everyone, and see you soon. Bye bye.